Hello, my name is Kate, and I work in marketing. I am 27 years old. Since I was a young child, I have always imagined the ideal wedding. But one day, my entire world was upended, and everything changed. As a child, I was the family's responsible member. The golden child and the focal point of our parents' existence was my younger sister, Emma. We all had parts to play, and I was content with mine, so it never really worried me. However, nothing could have foreseen the treachery that broke my heart. It all began on a bright afternoon. I recall being eager to complete the last few things for my impending wedding as I entered my parents' home. I was immediately struck by an odd smell as soon as I entered, a combination of sawdust and fresh paint. I wandered into the kitchen, confused. Only a few weeks ago, the kitchen had been antiquated and dingy, but now it looked quite different. It resembled something from a home improvement program and was shiny and contemporary. "Mom, Dad, what's all this?" My voice reverberated off the gleaming new tiles as I asked. My mother smiled broadly as she turned to face me. "Oh, my dear, isn't that wonderful?" We determined that Emma needed a chef-fit kitchen. You are aware of how small the previous one was. Emma said, her enthusiasm evident in her voice. "Yes, Kate, have a look at this. It's amazing how much space there is now." A knot started to form in my stomach. It didn't feel quite right. The words escaped my lips before I could stop myself from asking the question that was on my thoughts. Where did the money for this come from? There was silence in the room. My dad cleared his throat and looked away awkwardly. "Well, since Emma needed it more, we used your wedding fund," my mother said, her once jolly tone becoming rigid. My heart sank as I froze. My wedding budget. The funds you've been setting aside for me since my birth? Tears filled my eyes, and my voice wavered. In an attempt to defend it, my mother nodded. "It made sense, Kate. This was significant to Emma because her kitchen was so antiquated. We believed we could assist her. You used it without even asking me." I cut in, my voice trembling with incredulity and rage. Emma's expression dimmed. "I had no idea, Kate. I assumed they were wealthy. I didn't anticipate using your wedding budget for that." It didn't matter what she said. The damage was already done. I looked to my parents for a show of regret, but all I saw in their eyes was excuses. I answered, "I see where your priorities are," in a chilly, aloof tone. "Consider yourselves uninvited to the wedding." "Kate, please wait," my mother begged as she approached me. "No," I snapped, more firmly than I meant to. "I don't want you there if my dreams have this little significance for you. I'm making my decision now that you've made yours." I turned and left the house without waiting for another word. It seemed like my heart was breaking a bit more with each step I took, and each one seemed heavier than the one before it. Tears were running down my face by the time I reached my car. This was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. I had been planning my wedding for months, and now the people I thought would support me the most had crushed that dream without a second thought. I drove home, trying to process what had just happened. Memories of all the times I had been the responsible one flashed through my mind. I had always done everything I could to make my parents proud. I worked hard, saved money, and never caused trouble. Meanwhile, Emma, the golden child, always seemed to get everything handed to her. This time, though, it was too much. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal. They had taken something meant for me, something I had dreamed about my entire life, and given it away without even considering how it would affect me. As I sat alone in my apartment that evening, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the kitchen or the wedding fund. It was about how I had always been treated as second best. For years I had accepted it, thinking that was just the way things were. But now I saw things clearly. This was my time to stand up for myself, to put my own happiness first. For once, it wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had to move forward without their support. In the end, the wedding would still happen, and it would still be beautiful. The people who truly cared about me would be there to celebrate, and that was all that mattered. This betrayal hurt more than I could put into words, but it also gave me strength. It taught me to value myself and my dreams, even when others didn't. And for that, I would forever be grateful. I reached my car, and tears rolled down my face like an unstoppable river. But with those tears came something else, a new determination. It was as solid and unshakable as the fancy granite countertops that had replaced my lifelong dream of a perfect wedding. My wedding would still happen, but it would be on my terms, smaller, simpler, and entirely mine. As for my family, they had made their choice. Now I was making mine. From this moment on, I would focus on building a life where I came first. The one day that was supposed to be all about me would truly reflect what I wanted. After canceling my parents' invitations, I thought the worst of the drama might be over. I was wrong. Adjusting my wedding plans felt bittersweet, but soon rumors began to spread. I could only guess that my parents were proudly showing off Emma's shiny new kitchen to anyone who would listen. One afternoon, as I sipped coffee with my best friend Sabrina, she leaned forward, her expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Kate, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Your parents actually said Emma's kitchen was a better investment than a wedding." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So apparently, my biggest milestone in life is less important than a fancy kitchen remodel, I said, sarcasm dripping from my words. Sabrina stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. "I mean, really? A kitchen is more important than your wedding? That's just ridiculous." Her reaction mirrored my own feelings. I thought I had already felt the worst of their betrayal, but somehow, hearing those words made it hurt even more. I clenched my hands around my coffee mug, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "They just don't get it," I said, my voice tight with anger. "But if they think they can brush this off without consequences, they're wrong." Sabrina nodded, her expression serious. "Good. They need to realize what they've done. This isn't just about a kitchen. It's about how they've treated you." I knew she was right. They needed to understand the impact of their actions. And for that, I needed support from someone who truly understood what I was going through. That's when I decided to reach out to my Uncle Tony. Tony had distanced himself from the family years ago, frustrated with their shallow values and favoritism. Reconnecting with him felt like finding a lifeline. "You know, Kate," he said one evening as we sat in his warm, book-filled study, "I always knew your parents favored Emma. But this is on a whole other level." His voice was rough with disapproval, and I could see the frustration in his eyes as he spoke. "Yeah," I replied, my own anger boiling over. "And now they're parading it around town like it's something to be proud of." Tony shook his head, his jaw tight. "They've made their priorities clear, Kate. Now it's your turn to do the same." His words struck a chord in me. I wasn't just planning a wedding anymore. I was taking control of my life. This wasn't just about one day. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to let their actions define me. For the first time, I felt strong enough to do it. I couldn't let this go. The hurt and anger were too strong. As I sat with Uncle Tony, I voiced my frustration, unsure of how to move forward. Tony leaned in, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "What if we don't let it go?" he said. "What if we let everyone see them for who they really are?" His idea was simple yet brilliant, a family reunion. It had been years since we had one, and Tony offered to host it at his place. The goal was to expose my parents' actions in front of the whole family. Planning the reunion gave me a sense of purpose. It was something to focus on besides my scaled-down wedding. Tony and I worked together, going through guest lists and contacting relatives we hadn't seen in years. The invitations hinted at a big surprise, sparking curiosity. When the day of the reunion arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. Tony's large backyard buzzed with chatter as relatives greeted each other and caught up. I watched as my parents arrived, looking both confused and cautiously pleased by the attention. Once everyone had settled in, Tony clinked his glass, calling for silence. The murmur of conversations faded, and all eyes turned to him. "Family," he began, his voice commanding and steady. "We're here today to celebrate truth and transparency among us." I noticed my parents exchanging uneasy glances. They could sense something was off. Tony continued, his tone growing more serious. "And what better way to celebrate truth than by clearing up some misconceptions?" He turned to me and gave a small nod. Taking a deep breath, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. Many of you have probably heard about or even seen my sister Emma's beautiful new kitchen. I began, trying to steady my voice. What you might not know is how it was paid for. Whispers rippled through the crowd as I pulled out copies of bank statements and contractor bills. "These documents show exactly where the money came from," I said, holding them up for everyone to see. "The money set aside for my wedding, money saved for me since I was a child, was used without my permission to fund that kitchen remodel." A shocked silence fell over the crowd, broken only by murmurs of disbelief. My parents' faces turned a deep shade of red. Emma stared at her feet, clearly mortified. I continued, my voice shaking with emotion. "My dream, my wedding, was deemed less important than a set of fancy appliances and granite countertops." Tony stepped forward then, his voice firm and commanding. "We stand for fairness and support in this family. Today, we've seen an example of the opposite. Let's reflect on what this means for us as a family moving forward." The crowd buzzed with shock and indignation. Why would they do such a thing? An aunt called out, disbelief heavy in her tone. I answered, my words bitter but honest. In their eyes, it was about necessity, what they thought was more important. But in doing so, they overlooked fairness and respect for me. Emma, her face bright red with embarrassment, suddenly stood up. "Kate, I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I had no idea the money came from your wedding fund. If I had known, I would never have let this happen." Her apology felt sincere, but it didn't erase the damage. I appreciated her words, but the betrayal wasn't just about her. It was about my parents and their decision to disregard my dreams without a second thought. As the reunion ended, the family's attitude toward my parents shifted. Their actions were now out in the open, and the truth couldn't be ignored. It wasn't the way I wanted things to unfold, but it gave me closure. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could move forward, stronger and more determined than ever to prioritize my happiness and the life I wanted to build. I didn't know, Kate. I swear I didn't know about the money," Emma said, her voice shaky, her eyes wide with guilt. "It's not just about the money, Emma," I replied, unable to hide my frustration. "It's about trust. It's about respect." "Our intention was never to hurt anyone," Dad said defensively, stepping in. Emma needed help, and we made a tough call. A tough call? I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. What about my wedding? What about my dreams? The air grew tense as relatives shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the tension between us. Seems to me, an older cousin spoke up cautiously. "You thought only of one daughter. What about Kate?" Another relative chimed in, their tone sharper. How do you justify choosing between your children like that? The room erupted into a heated argument. Voices overlapped, family members taking sides. Some expressed sympathy toward me, while others tried to justify my parents' actions. It was a chaotic mix of emotions. Enough. Tony's voice cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent, his commanding presence demanding attention. This isn't just a family squabble over money, he said, his voice steady and firm. It's about priorities. Today, we've seen clearly where those priorities lie for some of us. The crowd grew quiet, the tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. My parents, usually so confident, now looked small under the weight of the disapproving stares directed at them. The reunion, which had started as a cheerful family gathering, had turned somber and uncomfortable. Slowly, relatives began to leave, offering me sympathetic glances and brief words of support. "I'm sorry, Kate," Emma muttered as she walked past me, unable to meet my eyes. "Don't be," I said softly. "It's not your fault. But it's clear now I need to step away from this. From them." The drive home was quiet, my earlier resolve to expose the truth now mixed with a deep sadness. It wasn't easy to face the reality of my parents' choices, but there was also a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and with it came a chance to move forward, not just with my wedding plans, but with my life. In the days following the reunion, the fallout was immediate. Whispers of betrayal spread quickly through the community. My parents, who had always been respected, now faced harsh judgment from neighbors and friends. Walking through town, I felt the weight of the community's whispers. At the grocery store, I overheard snippets of conversations. "Did you hear about the Johnsons?" Someone whispered. They took money from their daughter's wedding fund for a kitchen remodel. "Yeah," another voice replied, and at the expense of their other daughter. Poor Kate. The judgment from others was a strange kind of comfort, not joy, but validation that I wasn't overreacting. People saw what had happened for what it was, a betrayal. The looks my parents received in public were a stark contrast to the admiration they were used to. They couldn't ignore the consequences of their actions anymore, and it was clear they felt the weight of the community's disapproval. Despite everything, I felt a small sense of peace. The truth was no longer hidden, and I no longer had to carry the burden alone. My wedding would go on, smaller and simpler, but it would be a celebration of the people who truly cared for me. This painful experience taught me something important. I deserved to be surrounded by people who valued me and my happiness. It hurt to step away from my parents, but I realized that sometimes creating boundaries is the only way to protect yourself. With each passing day, I felt a little stronger. I had faced the betrayal, exposed the truth, and stood up for myself. It wasn't the wedding I had once dreamed of, but it was still my day, and it was still mine to cherish. In the end, I realized that this wasn't just about a kitchen or a wedding fund. It was about respect, love, and fairness, things I had a right to demand in my life. From that point on, I vowed to never settle for less. Validation came slowly, but it arrived nonetheless. It felt good to know that the pain I had endured was seen, even if only by strangers. People now understood what I had gone through, and that recognition made me feel less alone. One chilly Thursday morning, as I browsed the local market, I spotted Emma. She approached me hesitantly, a wicker basket dangling awkwardly from her arm. Her nervousness was clear, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say. "Kate," she began softly. "Save it, Emma," I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not in the mood." She paused, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her tone sincere. "I really didn't know." I shook my head, my emotions carefully guarded. Whether you knew or not doesn't change what happened, I said flatly. They chose you, Emma. They always choose you. And somehow, I'm always the one paying the price. Her expression crumbled, hurt filling her eyes. In the past, I might have softened at that look, but not this time. I couldn't let myself go back to that place. I need space, Emma, I said, my voice unwavering. Space to heal and rebuild my life without the chaos our parents bring. She nodded slowly, taking a small step back. I understand, she said quietly. But if you ever need me, just know I'm here. I watched her walk away, her shoulders slumped as though she were carrying the weight I had carried for so long. For the first time, though, I felt lighter, stronger. The months that followed brought whispers of my parents' misfortunes. Their once thriving boutique, a cornerstone of their social standing, was struggling. Regular customers who had once admired their charm now saw them in a different light. The Johnsons, "No thank you," I overheard one woman say at a coffee shop. You can't trust them, not after what they did to their own daughter. Their reputation crumbled, and with it, their financial stability. Rumors of bankruptcy surfaced, a sharp contrast to the life of comfort and privilege they had always enjoyed. While their world seemed to fall apart, mine was finally coming together. My wedding day arrived, not with the grandeur I had once imagined, but with something far better, a heartfelt celebration filled with love. The venue was small and intimate, decorated with simple elegance. Close friends and a few family members who had stood by me filled the space. Every moment felt like a stitch mending the fabric of my self-worth. "Congratulations, Kate," Uncle Tony toasted, raising his glass with a proud smile. "Here's to new beginnings and true happiness." The reception was filled with laughter and dancing. The soft glow of fairy lights and the scent of jasmine filled the air, creating a magical atmosphere. It wasn't perfect because it was extravagant. It was perfect because it was real. As my personal life flourished, so did my career. Promotions came my way, opening doors to new opportunities. I was invited to speak at marketing panels, where I shared my experiences and inspired others facing their own challenges. The toxic chaos that had once defined my life was gone. In its place was a newfound sense of control, choice, and peace. Looking back, I realized that losing my parents' support had been painful, but it also gave me the freedom to grow into my best self. My life was no longer about meeting others' expectations. It was about living on my terms. There were days when the grief crept in, and the road wasn't easy. However, I felt stronger and more assured with each stride I took. My work, my marriage, and my happiness were all evidence that I could create a life that was truly mine, free from the specters of covert animosity and partiality. I felt completely at ease for the first time in years. My story has nothing to do with a nice kitchen or a wedding money. It was about selecting a life where I came first, recovering my dreams, and discovering my voice. I would never take that gift for granted. I created a life with individuals who encouraged me rather than depressed me. I sat on my balcony one peaceful evening and enjoyed the sound of the wind chimes and the refreshing breeze. I thought back on the path that had led me to this moment. Although the betrayal I went through was a painful lesson, it gave me invaluable insight into my own resilience and value. Looking up at the sky, I came to the realization that the strongest people are frequently those who have faced the most difficult obstacles in life. Even if everything was set in motion by my parents' choices, the conclusion was determined by my own. I knew I had made the proper decisions for myself at that peaceful moment. This is Kate's tale of growth, happiness, and betrayal. How do you feel about her choice to cut ties with her family? Could it have been handled differently, or do you believe it was the right decision? Leave a comment below with your opinions. For more motivational stories like this one, remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video if you liked the story. We are able to tell more stories thanks to your support.